Hi and welcome. I'm Amey Miller, and this is a presentation of my novel Snakes, the first volume in the series Songs of All Other Birds. There will be a 15-minute video which combines page spreads and readings. Following that will be an interview conducted by poet Paul Watsky and a Q&A. Anytime during the event today, please send us questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom window, and I'll respond to them during the Q&A portion of the event. And feel free to leave comments via the chat feature. My deep thanks to Paul, videographer Emma Geiger, the other 6 readers, and to snake handlers Rachel Keel, Deborah Simon, Will Halman, and David Keel. Let's get to it.
A village is the place where everything goes on. Howard Norman, Northern Tales. This sheet of paper, according to the techniques of the Buddha, is empty. But empty of what? This is the question. Empty of what? Empty of a separate existence, empty of a separate self. And it means that at the same time it is full. Full of what? Full of everything else. Thich Nhat Hanh, The Art of Mindful Living. In this mood, in this weather, the most apparently commonplace fragment in Ashley's Cuckoo Bird, the verse seemingly most unburdened by any shard of meaning cannot be meaningless. We Americans are all cuckoos, Oliver Wendell Holmes said in 1872. We make our homes in the nests of other birds. This is the starting point.
Our southern town holds at last estimate 43,977 souls, plus the 14,037 in our contiguous adjacent town, which used to be but is no longer the serving town with the railroad depot. The complete student population of the university being at last count 24,189, we are like a snake with prey visibly balled up inside. Somewhere we picked up the slogan, "The Southern Part of Heaven." Mostly what puts us on the map is our basketball team, but we are perhaps a little bit renowned for our bell-let, Southern progressive politics and scholarship, and a good slacker music scene. In a dissenting view, a certain famous senator has suggested that our town is such a freak show, it would make sense to put a fence around us and charge admission. The farmlands have reverted to woodlots, and in the summertime, it's like living in a dense arboreal copse, can't see the sky, and the din of squirrels and cicadas and Carolina wrens and mourning doves and cardinals and blue jays and crows and etc. almost but not quite drowns out the leaf blowers and lawn mowers and chainsaws and cement mixers and tree grinders and UPS and FedEx and Airborne Express and the helicopters coming into the regional hospital, or the jet planes landing fat cats at the too small for them town airport, or the bigger higher jets going into the international airport a half an hour away. Here,
in a voice so loud and rollicking that it eclipses the songs of all other birds in the neighborhood, the Carolina wren announces its presence in woodland tangle or dooryard shrubbery. "Wheat eater, wheat eater, wheat," he clamors, and, without a break, switches suddenly to giddy up or tea party or it's raining, all in the same cadence and pitch. Reader's Digest, Book of North American Birds.
so how do you read Adam and Eve's impossible koan? Does it tell how humans lost touch with their animal neighbors? Just lost touch in general? It is hard to imagine God being as unforgiving, as relentless as that story gives out. So it is anyway that my Hannah lives in my town, that I am her neighbor, so to speak, or in fact. She can talk too much or too softly, or with garbled self-dismissive laughs. She doesn't get down to brass tacks. Like many of us, she is looking for love in wrong and right places, and she has a story to tell.
El Haisha Amar, Haraba Arbe Itzvonech Veheronech, Beetsev Teldi Vanim, Ve'elishech Teshukatech Vehu Yishmol Bach, Uladam Amar, Betseach Apecha Tocha Lachem, Ad Shuvcha El Ha'adama. Vaigeresh et Ha'adam, Vaishke Mikeden, Legan Eden et HaKeruvim, Ve'et Lachat HaCherev Hamitapechat, Lishmo et Derech Etz HaChaim. And to the women he said, I will make most severe your pangs in childbearing. To Adam he said, by the sweat of your brow shall you get bread to eat, until you return to the ground, for from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. He drove the man out, and stationed east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim, and the fiery, ever-turning sword, to guard the way to the tree of life.
Chapter 2, in which our heroine, Hannah Zelinsky-Levinson, begins building a picture of who she is and what's going on based on what she is willing or able to tell.
Andrew called me about the translating job, and I said I would go, although I haven't been out of town by myself for quite some time. It's a job I should be able to do. I don't have much occasion to speak Russian these days. And it's a chance to see Andrew. Our friendship has lapsed since we were in grad school together 7 years ago, but it was easy, even cheerful, to talk to him on the phone. The way Jake acted about my taking the job, as if he were my father and I should ask his permission, grilling me about how much it paid, whether I could do it, whether it was worth it to fly to Chicago. Jake this morning over breakfast, glum and unfriendly. Just the sounds of us chewing and silverware clattering on the plates. See you soon, I said. Yes, he said. I wish I could set the Jake I used to know beside him. He could tell him that I am not running away from home. Maybe I'll wake up and it will have been a dream, that I've married a man like my father who feels perfectly in the right and in charge of everything, including me, although they couldn't be more different. Jake, the university professor, chairman of chemistry, and my father who worked his way up from construction to contracting huge building projects. I've always had to have a book with me. My mother tells this story. In nursery school, another mother said to the teacher, "Why do you let Hannah carry a book all the time? What if all the children wanted to do that?" The teacher said, "Everyone doesn't want to carry a book. She's the only one." I'm still like this, even though I work in a library, and you might think I'd be tired of books. With all the heat now, the library is like a cool well. I spend all day inside, eat lunch in the staff room, and come out at the end of the day with a feeling of waking up in a strange place. There's a black and yellow butterfly floating in a bush, a young student with a bicycle.
Chapter 3.
Много раз я слышал от него отзывы еще более резкие. «Что тут трудного написать, как офицер полюбил барыню?» — говаривал он. «Ничего нет в этом трудного, а главное, ничего хорошего. Гадко и бесполезно. Если бы отец мог, он давно уничтожил бы этот роман, который он никогда не любил и к которому всегда относился отрицательно». Из воспоминаний Ли Толстого о своем отце. Many times I've heard far more cutting remarks from him. What is so difficult in writing about how an officer fell in love with a lady, he would say. There is nothing difficult about this, and most importantly, nothing good. It's disgusting and useless. I'm quite sure that if my father could, he would have long ago destroyed this novel, which he never liked and always treated with abnegation. From Ilya Tolstoy's Reminiscences of his father.
So these are two entries from Sofia Andreevna's diary from 1870. On February 24th, she wrote the following. «Вчера вечером он мне сказал, что ему представился тип женщины, замужней, из высшего общества, но потерявшей себя. Он говорил, что задача его сделать эту женщину только жалкой и не виноватой, и что как только ему представился этот тип, так все лица и мужские типы, представлявшиеся прежде, нашли себе место и сгруппировались вокруг этой женщины. And the English translation: last night he told me that he had envisioned a type of woman, married from the highest society, who had lost herself. He said that his task was to make this woman appear only pitiful, not guilty, and that as soon as he envisioned this woman, all the other characters, including the male ones, found their places grouped around this woman.
In 1872, Anna Pirogova, the mistress of Tolstoy's neighbor, A.N. Bibikov, committed suicide by throwing herself under a train after writing her lover a note which he did not receive in time. She was reportedly jealous over Bibikov's impending marriage to the family governess. It happened on the 4th of June at 7 p.m. A very well-dressed woman arrived at the Yasenki station, made the sign of the cross over herself, and then threw herself under the train, cutting herself in half. Tolstoy went to see her body.
The second one comes from the 5th of June. Сегодня четвертый день, как я отняла Левушку. Мне его было жаль почти больше всех других. Я его благословляла и прощала с ним, и плакала, и молилась. Это очень тяжело, этот первый полный разрыв со своим ребенком. Должно быть, я опять беременна. С каждым ребенком все больше отказываешься от жизни для себя и смиряешься под гнетом забот, тревог, болезней и годов. And the translation. 5th of June. Today is the 4th day since I weaned Lyovushka. I felt sorry for him more than for all the other children. I blessed him, and I took my leave of him, and I cried and prayed. It's very hard, this first complete separation from your child. I must be pregnant again. With each new child, you give up living for yourself more and more, and humble yourself under the yoke of troubles, worries, illnesses, and years.
Лев Толстой к Николаю Николаевичу Страхову. 25 марта 1873 год. Как грустно мне было читать ваше письмо, многоуважаемый Николай Николаевич. Если бы вы остались у нас, ничего бы этого не было. Я бы воспользовался вами дольше. Спасибо за обещание. Я буду рассчитывать на него и напоминать вам. Вы мне не пишете, поступили ли вы на службу и ясно ли определено ваше положение. Пожалуйста, напишите. Я невольно, нечаянно, сам не зная зачем и что будет, задумал лица и события, стал продолжать. Потом, разумеется, изменил, и вдруг завязалось так красиво и круто, что вышел роман, который я нынче кончил начерно. Роман очень живой, горячий, законченный, которым я очень доволен, и который будет готов, если даст Бог здоровья, через 2 недели, и который ничего общего не имеет со всем тем, над чем я бился целый год. Если я его кончу, я его напечатаю отдельной книжкой, но мне очень хочется, чтобы вы прочли его. Не возьмете ли вы на себя его корректуры с тем, чтобы печатать в Петербурге? Same letter, English version. To Nikolai Nikolaevich Strakhov, March 25th, 1873. How saddening it was for me to read your letter, my dear Nikolai Nikolaevich. If only you had stayed with us, none of this would have happened, and I would have extended our visit much longer. Thank you for your promise. I will count on it and remind you of it. You haven't written to me of whether you have resumed your work, and if your condition has been clearly diagnosed. Please do let me know. Involuntary, unexpectedly, with little self-reflection or thought of what would come of it, I thought up characters and events, began envisioning the storylines, and naturally altered all previously written. And suddenly it formed and wrote so beautifully and swiftly that a novel emerged, which I have finished today in draft. A novel filled with life, so fierce and complete. I am quite proud of it, and should be done with it, God willing, in 2 weeks' time. And it has nothing to do at all with what I've been working on this year. If I complete it, I will release it as a book on its own, but I want desperately for you to have a read at it first. Would you perhaps be willing to take on editing of it, with the goal of it being published in St. Petersburg?
So then, later, Tolstoy wanted to destroy the novel that detailed the suicide of his beautiful heroine, the repository of so much of his own vitality, physicality, despair, and crazed, thin-skinned orneriness. But my Hannah's not going to commit suicide, okay? I know her that well. She's dutiful, a goody two-shoes. She's bringing the message to Garcia my summer camp director used to tell us about, as a way of inciting us to do the right thing. Garcia was pronounced Garcia, with a hard American sound to it. And there was another story about a man not being able to tell a black horse apart from a white horse. But wouldn't it count as important as Hannah mimes putting one foot in front of the other, that she's more truly slowed to a halt? She won't tell you this because she doesn't know it.
Well, thanks so much to Emma for that wonderful video. And I believe that Paul Watsky is joining us now. Hi, Paul. Thanks so much for doing this.
Amy, how are you?
So we're going to be interviewing each other.
Well,
Actually, Paul's going to be interviewing me.
I'm hoping it's more me interviewing you than
That's
because I'm not prepared to be interviewed. But I wanted to
Joke,
ask
comma, feeble.
what's that?
Joke, comma, feeble.
Indeed. Well, I was going to ask you, Songs of All Other Birds might fit under the rubric of experimental fiction. How do you see that?
Well, actually, interestingly, a teacher of mine likes the term formal rather than experimental because you're trying to create a form that will fit what you want to express and what you want to do, how you want to work. And this particular project was, it is a midlife crisis novel, but the germ of it was the woman, Hannah, going to Chicago to translate. And I could not get the novella that I wrote to be as expressive as I wanted. And on a residency at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, I took out scissors and Scotch tape and started just cutting it up and adding images. And it really began to feel more like I could work with the material and with what I was interested in studying and writing about more that way. And I also think this scrapbook form just turned out to be the form that really suited what I was trying to do. Another thing to say is that I'm really influenced by children's books, by illustrated children's books. And the color was really an important piece that really made it come more alive to me and made me feel more invested in it, and I could work with it.
I think in a sort of age that's been influenced by modernism, people tend to associate form, though, with accessibility. Hallmark verses, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the form that you've chosen seems almost to favor obscurity. Modernist poet Wallace Stevens once wrote that the poem must resist the intelligence almost successfully. And your poem certainly kind of pushes back against your novel pushes back against people's inclination to just sort of have an easy ride.
It definitely does. It definitely, I like that quote a lot. That's really, really suits it. Yeah.
Age like an important piece of information is partly obscured by a leaf that you put there. So it's not exactly a welcome mat.
Right. And I do want that. I don't want it to feel utterly impenetrable. And actually, a friend of mine who got it in the mail wrote me that it was a jungle. And I felt that was fair. And but she left it around for a while, but then she picked it up and actually found that she could get into it. And I really appreciated that. But it does, I want, Nathaniel Mackey, a writer I like, talks about noise. And I wanted to feel that sense of noise and the sense of kind of being besieged in some ways by all the different voices and all the things that go on, both internally and in the world. And so hopefully that will strike a chord with people, that they feel like it does in certain ways represent an experience they know about. Now, for some people, they don't want that at all. And so that's reasonable.
Well, I think you could say, though, that's kind of like the position of modernism, which is to favor the experience over the form of rendering of the experience. So you might want to ask your friend, does she consider jungle a literary form when she uses the term? But that leads towards the question of what kind of attitude you want the reader to bring to this book.
Well, I would love some adventurousness and some curiosity. I would like them to accept that this barragement is part of the and this kind of tangle is part of what I'm trying to express, and be interested in it. And also that there is an aspect of celebration and solace in it as well, not just all the harsh realities. There's a sense of journey, I think, in it. That's what I would hope.
Well, Tolstoy is someone you call attention to in the novel, and there seems to be a deliberate parallel being made between Anna Karenina and Songs of All the Birds. So what is your mental relationship to Tolstoy?
Well, it's interesting because there's kind of in Slavic studies, there can be kind of a binary where some people love Dostoevsky, some people are in the Dostoevsky camp, and some people are in the Tolstoy camp. And if pushed, I will be in the Dostoevsky camp, interestingly. I had written a paper on Anna Karenina for a class that went very well. And so I ended up giving that field of study to the narrator. And then he kind of hijacked. Then I became so interested in Tolstoy himself and his wife and marriage and some of his midlife crisis aspects. And I just kind of went down the proverbial rabbit hole, studying it more and more, just somewhat gripped by, as so many people have been for so long, and Anna Karenina, both the Tolstoy life and the novel are just so, understandably, just so gripping to people. And I seem to have been one of them. It just happened.
Well, you made it a point that I'm curious about. Maybe everybody else here already knows this, but what determines whether you side with Dostoevsky or with Tolstoy? What are the attributes of the people who go one way or the other?
And somebody that's a more professional Slavicist would probably be able to answer that better. But I think Dostoevsky is considered more ecstatic and more wound up in emotions in some ways that become more unmoored, and Tolstoy is the more orderly writer and thinker, and always so long interested in philosophy, interested in science, interested in so many things, learning all these languages, Greek, and is very much of a scholar. So I think that could be a distinction, but
how about a social class sympathy, though?
Yeah, because you definitely do have the Count and the underground man, which of course Dostoevsky was not himself an underground man, but still, coming from a very different class. That's true. Yeah.
Well, he certainly got tangled up with the Tsar's secret police in a way that Tolstoy, I think, was able to cruise by.
Right, right. Good point. Yeah, yeah,
Which kind
yeah, yeah,
of,
yeah. Although he certainly he ran very much afoul of the Russian Orthodox Church, and but yeah, maybe because of his class, he was more protected. Yeah.
Well, how about the icons that you've got in the book? Are they pointing towards that issue?
Yeah, I think there's a very strong religious impulse in my work, and that is one place where that's pointed to. It's Russian icons are so key to Russian culture, and then there's the color and just the energy of them, and this the deep well of history in them. So, but they're not very explained. That's another example of something where somebody could say, well, gosh, you just threw that in. They could reasonably complain that it wasn't motivated enough or something. But if you think of it as a scrapbook, and the person, and also there's the whole commonplace book tradition of people making quotes and writing stuff that they love, and so those pictures could be seen in that realm of grabbing, of wanting to save and kind of enshrine things that you're attracted to. A really key part of the book is that wonderful painting by Tomar Levine at the beginning of the novel, that you could see in the video just briefly, but the egg cup ritual, and that's a very key meaning field to me. I carried that card around with me since the early 90s from a artist that was at Cummington, that I was at Cummington with. And so I think that painting connects to the icon pictures in my mind, at least.
Could you speak more to how the painting resonates for you?
Well, it's very domestic. It's got the little old-fashioned egg cup that they used to use for breakfast and stuff. It's got a little kind of sentimental little picture on it. It's decorated a little bit, and then it's got shells and rocks around it. So the natural world is also just so key, and so it's a combination of the domestic and the natural, and that's very meaningful to me, the way it's put together, kind of, I think, in a very lovely way, and a little bit with a kind of wry sense of humor, even, I'd say.
Well, there's a theme here that is also woven into the novel that seems to have to do with the outsider. And domestic, to me, conjures up terms of conventional and sort of social inclusion and stability. But you've also got these three sort of outsider constituencies that you give voice to in the novel, one being Native American peoples, another being traditionally excluded, being women, and the third being children, who all seem on the sort of short end of
Yeah. I really appreciate that you're seeing that, and I believe it is definitely, the work has a feminist impulse and dedication, and both the two narrators are women, and both definitely feel they're partly unmoored just by their individual selves, their midlife issues, but they are very, very conscious of being women and how that works in terms of being dismissed or feeling, and having this be a historical thing, probably going back deep in their lives. And that's really important. And I think that's very cool about thinking about the child diary as, in some ways, giving voice to children that may oftentimes not appear, particularly speaking in their own voice, the way the diary does. Yes, the Native American, that's much stronger in the second volume, but I hope it does come through in this one too, that Hannah comes to her hometown, that it has this whole history that is effaced and not known by many people. And so yeah, I think that's I think that the outsiderness, I'm seeing my cheat sheet here. Yeah, I think the whole idea of so many other voices and things that are left out and suppressed, and the desire to learn more, is, I think, a real impulse of the novel as a whole. Like the writing of it, learning, but hopefully the reading of it could be some things that could expand how people thought about things. So that's a hope for it.
It kind of circles back towards where your reading began with the cuckoo, which is a parasitic bird. Actually, it invades the nests of other birds, lays its eggs there, and their young throw out the nestlings, which you could say is sort of what happened to the native peoples at the hands of the Europeans when they came over.
It definitely happened. And interesting, there's a wonderful book about George Washington as a surveyor, and that it was surveying that was the whole bedrock of what then happened with dispossession. And yeah, it's actually somewhat grim quote, obviously not somewhat grim, but in fact grim. And then there's the way in which we're all, there's the mestizo culture that is real globally, and that everybody is finding their way in other places and other languages. And there's something to tackle there, but speaking the truth about it is important, I believe, because it's an important history.
That gets me thinking about another aspect of the novel, because the surveyors are the advanced guard of the engineers who follow after them.
Yeah.
And then, according to what the surveyors tell them, they tear up the landscape.
Right,
And,
right.
What you have as the main plot line here is a trade meeting between groups of engineers for whom your central character is working as a translator. So does that tie in the way we're starting to look at this?
Yeah, I think so. There's the machine in the garden, and yet it is our garden and our machines, and we are them, and just simply purifying oneself is not going to work. So kind of, I think I was very delighted to another world that I entered into a bit to find out about was that world of these engineers, and to try to come up with with doing some research, some creditable idea of a joint venture, which is in some ways a very hard thing, not some ways was a very hard thing to do between the Soviet Union and the United States, but which was the translating job Hannah was going to. But yeah, it's another piece of the puzzle, really, another substratum. Paul, this is so wonderful. And I think that I feel like, I really, really appreciate your thoughtful questions. They have, as we've talked a little before this, they've really helped me think more about the book. So I guess we should ask Will, though, if there's some questions, so that we run kind of on time, because people probably have some other things to do. Hi, Will.
Hello. Yes, there are questions.
Okay.
We have several. Let's see. First one we will respond to is Eunice Panetta. She asks, please say more about colors in your work and how you think about the relationship of color to language or to experience.
Yeah, because language colors experience itself, even without putting actual pictures in. But I just think color is so rich. I was just reading about nutrition, that it's a really good sign if something has a really bright color, because that means it has all sorts of things that you need. But I feel there's so much energy in color, and yes, words themselves actually can have energy without having to put a picture in. So maybe that's the most I could say about that for right now. But that's a nice question. Thank you.
Jeff Benz asked, how did you finally settle on the organization / ordering of this volume?
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, and Jeff, I owe so much to. Is a wonderful. We traded work, and he's really been part of every page of this book. But as it morphed, it probably changed after we worked. But yes, how did I decide? I think there was the idea of the narrator and the not Hannah, the woman going to Chicago, but the narrator kind of busting in. So I think that that was the first part, but then I realized that I wanted this more diaristic energy. And so in the novel, I talk about dropping down into the domestic, and then I have the child's diary, and then I have an adult diary that is the framing narrator's diary. And she has a whole story and she's also troubled in her marriage. But there's a lot about daily life in that one. And then I guess I allowed the Hannah story to end out the novel, giving that kind of simpler story kind of the end point. And then there was the development of all this academic paraphernalia at the end, which was generated out of the novel. It started out just simply as giving the attributions for the quotes, but then became kind of hijacked itself, like long parts about the Native Americans. And that became kind of a real delight, I think. And then that wonderful, the Pushkin quote that Tolstoy started out, the guests were gathering at the dacha. I got this wonderful book through interlibrary loan that was this really old copy of that Pushkin, that had the Pushkin little story or a remnant in it. That ended up feeling really, really strong to me as an end point, because it explained the book. It went to the bookliness of it, which I really wanted to highlight, that this is kind of a piece of book art. So I guess that's good enough on that. Yes?
Yeah. We have several questions, and there have been comments about how much people enjoyed the video. And one person asks, Katie asks, where is the beautiful stone wall behind other readers? It's something we discussed.
Can you see it outside here? This is a little, my book is a bit of a cottage industry kind of thing. So that is here at my house. And it is actually, Katie, a family of stonemasons that built a lot of African-American stonemasons that built a lot of stonework over on the UNC campus. And it was amazing to see them work with it, because these are actually real boulders. It is not a facade. These are actual real boulders. So that's a pretty cool thing. And Paul, is there anything that's come up here that, did we lose him?
Well, I think he's
resting.
Yes, his camera's off, but who knows?
Okay.
He may be there.
But okay, and go ahead.
We have so many questions. If you
great.
As long as you want to go, I think. Yeah. Wow. Yes. Let's see. Hold on a second. All right. Yes, we finished that one. Can we get some guidance on connecting Hannah's travails with Tolstoy's or his wife's? Says Kathleen Williams.
Oh, well, the Tolstoys really struggled with their marriage, and Tolstoy himself, Lev Tolstoy, had a fairly major midlife crisis, and then there is the romance and the suicide of a romance. And here Hannah, it seems like maybe entering into a romance, and is she in danger? So there's the relationship of the book, Anna Karenina, to this book, in the sense that, and I guess many novels, it's very old fashioned to have infidelities at the center of them. So, and that's a whole issue of trust between people, which is an issue of great interest in terms of the peaceable kingdom we might like to have. So there you are, Paul. Hi, do you have any thoughts about all that has gone on so far? Any thing to add or query?
Not particularly. I would not have been able to say where the stone wall was.
In the picture. Yeah, maybe it's not showing out this side. I think it's out this side and maybe not in the back. So,
but it does occur to me that you keep talking about a second volume, and why don't you give us a bit of a preview?
Okay, well, it's called Traverse, and Hannah's husband comes to Chicago, and they walk all around Chicago and argue and have trouble. And then there's a huge amount of Tolstoy stuff that is going side by side with it. And then the narrator and the framing narrator is really struggling in her life and she's a teacher, and there's things that happen to her there. So, and the Native American plot line is much larger. I'm generating a very big timeline of Native peoples of the Chicago area. And I'm planning, at least at this point, there's a wonderful map of Chicago Indian trails that someone did, is to put that at the chapter headings as Hannah and Jake are wandering around all over Chicago, is like where relative to these trails are that they are. So that's of interest to me. But anyway, yeah, it's called Traverse, and it's about 3/4 done, but the last quarter is really is a bear. So we'll see.
So were you looking towards the old popular Victorian novel format of what George Gissing called the triple-decker novel? Where in his novel Grub Street, he talks about the writers who produce these for a living and how little they get paid.
I think so. I think that's a good model. Yes. Oh well, I feel very, very grateful to be able to do it. It's really meant the world to me to be able to do this work and to be in conversation with people. And a wonderful thing about having a book is to be able to really enter into even more conversations about the work with people is really meant a lot. So that's
we
good.
have more questions if you're up.
Okay. So yeah, we don't want to hold people too much beyond, but it seems like a couple more would work. Yeah.
Maya asks, you mentioned children's books. Are there specific ones that influenced you? And then did you look at any artist books, specifically books made by visual artists when collaging words and images? Children's books and artist books.
Well, I love artist books. Mine is a little different, I think, than generally. There are artist books that are kind of more one of a kind, and there's only one copy of them, and this is definitely not that. Yeah, I love so much art, and I feel very, very influenced by art. And so I guess I just came up with something that I could do myself without all of the chops that a usual like Maya herself, who is a wonderful visual artist, would have. But as far as individual children's books, it's a fairly, my daughter would testify, it is a huge number. The Oz books were very influential. The Little House books, very influential. I love A Hole is to Dig and Open House for Butterflies, really, really big book for me. All the wonderful Wyeth illustrated books, the Stevenson, and but the list goes on, and it's very varied. So yeah, thank you for that, Maya. Yeah.
Rachel is asking, have you always used images and quotes, collage elements as a writer? If not, when did you start adding them to your work?
Well, it was in 1998 when I went to VCCA, and actually that's interesting because somebody asked me once about when I first became a novelist, and I said, well, I started writing a diary when I had to move to DC, which was really, really rough, from Marin County, California, when I was 11. But actually, all up until 98, I wrote shorter stuff. And it was only in 98 when I started in with the collage thing that I started extending more into a more novelistic form. So, but I think I've just always been so drawn to art and to what it does. So that's nice. Thanks for that, Maya. Oh, Rachel, that was Rachel.
Oh yeah, Rachel was asking.
Thanks for that, Rachel.
Well, we're at our time here. So what do you think? Do you want to do one more and then?
Okay, one more sounds good. Yeah.
All right. Let's see.
This has been lovely. Thanks, everyone.
This is from Tim Griffin. He says, I think of your book as 3 dimensions all in motion. Any titillating hints as to how this Rubik's Cube will ultimately come together?
Well, and that's going to be in the eye of the beholder, I guess. But yeah, I think that Hannah Arendt wrote her dissertation on Augustine's concept of love, and she had a very communitarian impulse, and that this work does as well as being really interested in individuals and how we negotiate difference as individuals. But I would say that love is the answer, but it's also aspirational, in the sense that just as Augustine's City of God was. So I'm not sure if how it comes together, but watch this space. So thanks so much, Paul. Thanks, Will. Thanks to you all. And I guess I look forward to talking in the future. And goodbye.